Let's look at a map of Italy. At first glance, it is one of the world's most recognizable shapes. A long peninsula stretching into the Mediterranean, framed by the Alps in the north and surrounded by the sea on three sides. Not to mention, it also has the iconic shape of a boot. It is one nation, one flag, one language. And yet, for more than 160 years, Italy has lived with a quiet question. Is it truly one country, or is it still in many ways two? Across nearly every measurable indicator, income, employment, infrastructure, industrial concentration, or migration patterns, a clear divide appears between northern and southern Italy. The gap is large enough that economists sometimes compare it to the historical divide between East and West Germany. Others describe southern Italy as the largest underdeveloped macro-region in Western Europe. But statistics alone never tell the full story, because the differences between North and South are not just economic. They are geographical, historical, institutional, and also cultural. And most importantly, they are the result of centuries of structural development, not simple stereotypes about climate or work ethic. To understand why this divide exists and why it has proven so persistent, we must begin not with politics but with geography. Italy is often imagined as a uniform Mediterranean country, but it is not. Geographically, the Italian peninsula is sharply divided. In the north, it is dominated by one extraordinary geographic feature, the Po Valley. Stretching from Turin in the west to the Adriatic Sea in the east, the Po Valley is the largest continuous plain in southern Europe. It is flat, fertile, and well watered. Snowmelt from the Alps feeds the Po River and its tributaries, creating a dense network of freshwater resources, and this matters enormously. Flat land reduces construction costs, abundant water enables intensive agriculture, and river systems historically support trade and transportation. Proximity to the Alps also connects the region directly to Central Europe. The Po Valley is not simply another region of Italy. It is the country's agricultural core, industrial platform, and demographic center. Today, a disproportionate share of Italy's population, industry, exports, and financial institutions are concentrated here. But geography alone does not determine destiny. It shapes opportunity, and southern Italy developed under very different geographic conditions. Southern Italy is defined by the Apennine mountain chain, which runs down like a spine down the length of the peninsula. Unlike the broad plains of the north, much of the south is mountainous or hilly. Flat land is limited and often fragmented. Large-scale infrastructure projects are more expensive to build and to maintain. Internal connectivity is more challenging. Water availability is also less consistent. Parts of southern Italy have historically faced greater exposures to drought and water stress compared to the north's alpine-fed river systems. The south is also more geologically active. The Apennine fault system makes central and southern Italy more earthquake-prone than much of the north. Active volcanoes, including Mount Vesuvius and Mount Etna, are located in the south. These environmental risks do not prevent development, but over centuries, they raise costs, increase uncertainty, and complicate long-term capital investment. Geography does not explain everything, but it explains the starting conditions. If geography sets the stage, history determines how it is used. For nearly 1,400 years, from the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century until Italian unification in 1861, the peninsula was politically fragmented. But fragmentation did not affect all regions equally. From the Middle Ages onward, much of northern and central Italy developed powerful self-governing communes and city-states, like Milan, Venice, Florence, Genoa, or Bologna. These cities were not merely urban centers. They were political and economic laboratories. Many developed early banking systems, merchant guilds, maritime trade networks, and proto-industrial sectors. Venice and Genoa became maritime republics deeply integrated into Mediterranean and European commerce. Florence pioneered financial institutions that influenced banking across Europe. Crucially, many northern regions developed traditions of municipal governance and commercial autonomy. Even when formally under the influence of the Holy Roman Empire or foreign powers, local institutions often retained significant administrative capacity. This fostered what modern economists call institutional density, networks of local governance, contract enforcement, and civic organization. Southern Italy followed a different political trajectory. From the early Middle Ages onward, large parts of the south were ruled by successive, centralized monarchies. Byzantine authorities, Norman rulers, Swabians, Angevins, Aragonese, Spanish Habsburgs, and later Bourbon monarchs. The Kingdom of Naples and the Kingdom of Sicily, often collectively referred to as the Two Sicilies, were major political entities. At times, especially during the late Middle Ages, parts of southern Italy were economically significant within Mediterranean trade networks. However, governance structures in the south were generally more centralized and feudal in character. Large landed estates dominated agricultural production. Political authority was often distant from local communities. Where northern Italy saw the proliferation of merchant republics and urban autonomy, southern Italy experienced longer periods of centralized monarchy and large land-holding systems. Over centuries, these institutional differences contributed to divergent patterns of capital accumulation, land distribution, and civic engagement. When Italy unified in 1861 under the Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont, the new nation inherited these structural differences. The divide did not begin in 1861, but unification revealed it and, in some ways, deepened it. At the time of unification, northern Italy had more developed rail networks, literacy rates were significantly higher in parts of the north than in many southern provinces, and industrial production was already concentrated in northern regions. The newly unified Italian state adopted economic policies that favored industrial expansion, and industrial expansions took root most easily where infrastructure, capital, and geographic advantages already existed, in the north. The south remained more agricultural. As the Industrial Revolution accelerated across Europe, northern Italy integrated more rapidly into continental manufacturing and trade systems. Southern Italy faced a more difficult structural transition. This divergence became more pronounced during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and even more so after World War II. By the mid-20th century, Italy had effectively developed a dual economic structure, an industrialized, export-oriented north and a more agrarian, less industrialized south. It is critical to emphasize what this does not mean. It does not mean the southerners are less capable, that climate determines productivity, or that one culture is superior to another. The divide between north and south is not about inherent differences between people. It is about geography, infrastructure, institutional history, and cumulative economic path dependency. And path dependency, once established, is very difficult to reverse. This geographic and historical foundation sets the stage for what became one of the most persistent regional economic divides in Europe. If geography created different starting conditions and history shaped different institutions, the economy is where those differences became measurable. Today, the gap between northern and southern Italy is one of the most significant regional disparities in Western Europe. But how large is it really? When economists measure regional prosperity, one of the clearest indicators is GDP per capita, the average economic output per person. In northern Italy, regions such as Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna, and Veneto consistently record GDP per capita levels comparable and in some cases exceeding the European Union average. Lombardy alone produces roughly 1/5 of Italy's total GDP. In contrast, several southern regions, including Calabria, Sicily, and Campania, record GDP per capita levels significantly below the national average. Southern Italy represents roughly 1/3 of Italy's population, but contributes closer to 1/4 of its total GDP. This is not a small gap, it is structural. However, perspective matters. Southern Italy is not poor in global terms. Living standards remain high by international comparison. Human Development Index scores across the south remain within the range typical of advanced economies. The divide is relative, within Italy and within Western Europe, but relative differences matter politically, socially, and demographically. The disparities become even clearer in labor markets. Unemployment rates in southern Italy are considered higher than in the north, particularly among young people. Youth unemployment in southern regions has, at times, been double that of northern regions. Meanwhile, northern Italy's industrial clusters, automotive manufacturing, mechanical engineering, pharmaceuticals, fashion, food processing, precision manufacturing continue to generate higher productivity employment. This creates a powerful dynamic. Opportunity concentrates when industry concentrates, and industry tends to cluster where infrastructure, capital, and supply chains already exist. This is known as agglomeration economics, and northern Italy is one of Europe's most successful examples of it. Perhaps the most important economic consequence of this divide is migration. Since the mid-20th century, millions of Italians have moved from the south to the north in search of employment. The post-World War II economic boom, often called the Italian economic miracle, was driven largely by industrial expansion in the north. Factories in Turin, Milan, and Bologna needed labor. Southern Italy had surplus labor. The result was one of Europe's largest internal migration movements. Entire communities relocated. Family networks expanded across regions, and southern cultural influences became deeply embedded in northern cities. Today, many northern Italians have southern roots. but migration also produced long-term demographic effects. Southern Italy experienced population aging and brain drain, particularly amongst educated young people. When a region loses a significant share of its most economically active population, long-term growth becomes more difficult. The divide, therefore, reproduces itself in the future. Since the 1950s, the Italian state has repeatedly attempted to reduce the gap. One of the most significant initiatives was in the 1950s to promote development in southern Italy through infrastructure investment. Highways were built, industrial zones were created, and public funds were directed southwards. Later, European Union structural funds also targeted southern regions. And yet, full convergence never occurred, because development is not simply about injecting money. It requires efficient institutions, long-term capital investment, industrial ecosystems, skilled labor retention, and political continuity. Some southern regions experienced real improvements, but overall, the structural advantage of the north, geographic, industrial, and institutional, remained powerful. Modern Italian industry remains heavily concentrated in the north. Northern Italy is part of what geographers once described as Europe's industrial backbone, stretching from northern England through the Benelux countries, western Germany, Switzerland, and into the Po Valley. This proximity to Europe's densest economic core matters. Northern firms are physically closer to major European markets, which means logistic costs are lower, cross-border trade is easier, and supply chains are denser. Major global Italian brands in automotive manufacturing, luxury fashion, machinery, food productions are predominantly headquartered in the north. This does not mean that the south lacks industry, but it does mean that industrial density differs significantly between the two parts of Italy, and density creates resilience. Economic geography is reinforced by infrastructure. Northern Italy developed earlier and denser rail networks. High-speed train lines primarily connect major northern cities. Logistics corridors towards France, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland pass through the north. Southern Italy has modern infrastructure as well, but the density and integration levels differ. Infrastructure gaps affect commuting patterns, business logistics, investment decisions, and also regional integration. These differences are gradual, not absolute, but they do accumulate over time. Another important factor, often less visible, is institutional quality. Economists studying regional development often emphasize social capital, the degree of trust between citizens and institutions, and between economic actors. Northern Italy historically developed dense networks of civic associations, municipal governance, and business consortiums. Southern Italy developed under different administrative traditions, often more centralized and hierarchical. Again, this is not about culture in a simplistic sense. It is about long-term governance structures. Institutional capacity influences tax collections, contract enforcement, public investment efficiency, as well as business confidence. Small differences over decades can produce large cumulative effects. The economic divide has often been simplified into cultural stereotypes. This is misleading. Southern Italians are often described as warmer, more family-oriented, and more traditional. Northern Italians are sometimes described as more reserved, more career-oriented, more influenced by Central Europe. There are grades of regional cultural variation as in any country, but these differences are shaped by economic structures as much as they shape them. Higher unemployment affects social life. Urban density influences lifestyle, and migration reshapes identity. It is not accurate to frame the divide as a clash of personalities. Italy's diversity is not a weakness, it is a historical legacy of centuries of regional development. Even language reflects this. Before the 20th century, most Italians spoke regional languages or dialects. Standard Italian became widespread only after unification, and especially after mass education and national television in the 20th century. Despite linguistic unity today, regional identity remains strong. Few topics illustrate the north-south contrast more visibly than cuisine, but even here the explanation begins with the geography. Southern cuisine developed in a Mediterranean climate. Olive oil, tomatoes, citrus fruits, wheat-based pasta, and seafood dominate many traditional dishes. Northern cuisine reflects different environmental conditions. Rice in the Po Valley gave rise to risotto. Maize cultivation shaped polenta. Butter and dairy products are more common in alpine regions. Beef and pork are more central in certain northern traditions. These are not arbitrary differences. They reflect agriculture, climate, and trade routes. Over time, migration blurred these distinctions. Today, one can find southern cuisine in Milan and northern dishes in Naples, but regional culinary identities remain symbols of deeper geographic patterns. Italy is not two separate countries. It is one nation shaped by different historical trajectories. The difference between North and South is not the product of climate determinism or cultural superiority, but instead the result of geographic advantages and constraints, divergent medieval medieval political systems, uneven industrialization, migration flows, and institutional development. The question today is not whether the divide exists. It clearly does. The question is whether it is narrowing or becoming structurally entrenched. Southern Italy continues to face challenges: demographic decline, youth immigration, and slower productivity growth. Northern Italy faces its own issues: aging infrastructure, environmental stress in the Po Valley, and global competition. The future of Italy depends on integration, not division, because while history creates divergence, policy and investment shape convergence. I really hope you like this video. Until next time, ciao.